G'day, it's Gus Walland here from Gotcha for Life and Triple M. I'd love to invite you along to the Mental Fitness Gym. Go to the mentalfitnessgym.org. That is a place where you can pick up some exercises to build your mental fitness, to work on that emotional muscle, those muscles in your head that are so powerful. Please come and join us at the mentalfitnessgym.org for all that stuff to build your emotional muscle and your mental fitness.
The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leisure Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here. And look, this is going to be a bit of a podcast, a bit of a two-in-one sort of thing, as I usually do the Q&A podcast each and every weekend. I put up a post on Instagram having you put in your questions for me to answer about my thoughts about the NRL round, the NRLW, even Parramatta or rugby league in general, or even if you just want to ask me a random question as well, it might make the podcast as well. So look, I also put up a post as well, a question of the day, which I think I'll look at to doing as well, either throughout the week or on the Sunday or Saturday or sometime anyway during the week. So you just have to keep an eye out for that on Instagram. I've done it a few times before, but I like the engagement that I get from you guys, the listeners and the followers. It just gives me something to talk about that as well on the podcast, and I just love talking about rugby league. So, and you can either agree with me or not agree with me. I don't really mind. Everyone's got an opinion, but I put up the question the other day about on Instagram on a post about what. We'll start with this one anyway. What is the one rule in today's game that isn't a rule, but you would like to see back in the NRL as a rule? And I got a fair good response to that one. And we'll kick it off with Dweezil Doofushead, and I think that is Darren as well, as I would know him. But Dweezil_Doofushead, he has replied on Instagram there, so thank you very much. Now, he's actually got 3, and he and myself were really thinking about this one the same. We were on the same wavelength, because I didn't give an answer to this question, but Dweezil, aka Darren, has done that, and he has mentioned 3 actually. He has gone for number 1, the ability for a marker to strike for the ball, in brackets contested play the balls. A recent Hall of Fame inductee, Ben Elias, was a genius at that. Now, we'll just start off with that one. Yes, indeed, you are correct. Benny Elias, he was a absolute genius at that, and all through the 80s and early 90s. So that was a bit of a play that players could do at the play of the ball. The ball was put on the ground, and the front marker was able to have a crack at raking that back and getting possession for his team. And as Dweezil has mentioned there, Benny Elias, he was the best at it, certainly for the Balmain Tigers. I'd like to see that one come back. There's also been a lot of talk lately, which I think we might find in a few other comments coming up about the play of the ball anyway, so I'll see if I can wait for those ones. His second rule that he would like to bring back is tap the ball forward and running from the tackle when there's no marker at the play of the ball. Again, another play that Benny Elias was well known for, but also Bruce Maguire, I think in the 89 grand final, he got penalised by Bill Harrigan. That was a very controversial one. That one, he did do the tap the ball forward and then started running. Bill Harrigan blew a penalty against Bruce Maguire in that 89 grand final. Look, that one is also another good one. I do like that one, and that one was one that I was thinking of as well. I think these days, though, it's very rare, and it was very rare in those days too, but the opportunity was there to do this and get some extra meters for your team at a quick rate and potentially break the line in defence. So I like that one. And the third one he has was having the option to kick the ball ahead through the ruck at the play of the ball, bringing back more try-scoring situations. Now, this one is usually when a player gets tackled close to the try line, and what used to happen in the 80s and early 90s, from what I can remember anyway, was the fact that players would actually kick the ball forward and have the chance of scoring a try. Now, as I said, it was done really close to the line. You obviously wouldn't do it far out, but very close to the line where you have your line of defence. You would try and kick the ball through the ruck, almost like a mini grubber kick sort of thing, and then have that opportunity to score. I can't remember off the top of my head of any instances of that one. I'll see if I can think of any as I keep on talking, but I can't think of any at the moment. If I don't think of any today, I'll see if I can dig some up and put them on the Instagram page. But thank you very much, Dweezil_Doofushead, for bringing those ones up. Peter_Zuccolotto, who was a former podcast guest on the Paracave podcast. So if you missed that episode, come and check that one out. He's mentioned the flying wedge. Now, I believe this was before my time, and so I've only seen highlights of that one. I believe the Parramatta Eels tried that at some stage during the 80s. Where players would line up in what was called like symboled a wedge, and would move forward into the defensive line. I've only seen highlights on that one, and again, you can go into YouTube and you'll see, if you type in something like Parramatta flying wedge, you'll see what I'm talking about there. But that would certainly be an interesting one to bring back again, because you'd probably need about 5 or 6 players in that wedge at any one time. But I don't know who brought that one into play. I don't know whether that was one of Jack Gibson's Supercoach plays that he might have got from American Gridiron, but certainly that was interesting to watch. The next one comes from Mika_104. Thank you very much for sending this one through. And he says to make them play the ball with their foot every time. Not just an attempt. It is a fundamental rule of our game, and have no idea why they let it get to this. So much easy to rule on as well. Did it touch the foot? Yes or no? Done. Was that a genuine attempt? Who knows, unless you're a mind reader. Look, Mika, this is a very good one that you have brought up, and it has been highlighted on various rugby league shows over the last couple of weeks. And the ones that they highlighted in especially were the Penrith Panthers, but I do believe, and I have seen, that it does happen at other clubs. It just, the players try to get a competitive edge by rolling the ball through their legs to the dummy half, and it's just a competitive edge as it is a quick quicker motion than putting your foot on the ball, and limits the opportunity of potentially putting the ball on your foot and rolling it back too hard and then the dummy half knocking on. But the rule is that you need to have a genuine attempt to play the ball with your foot, and these days players are trying to break that rule by just rolling it, as I said. Now, over the weekend, I watched when this comment came through. I was actually watching a NRL game and a NRLW game side by side, split screen, and I did watch first of all, when this comment came through, I watched the set of 6 in the men's game, and none of those play the balls touched the foot. I then switched my attention to the NRLW game, and every play in that set of 6, the ball touched the foot in the play of the ball. So you can see the massive difference in between the men's game and the women's game there. That is just one example of it, and you're absolutely correct. I'd love the referees to crack down on that and actually you have to play the ball with your foot. So thank you very much for sending that one through. The next one comes through Para Eels _foreign correspondent. Thank you very much for sending this one through. No automatic sin bin for punches thrown would get rid of the cat antics of players like Reid Marnie. So, look, I think that's it there. And a couple of people have mentioned bring back the biff as well. Look, my opinion on that one is the fact that, look, the NRL has obviously thrown that out, the biff, out of the game, because they want to try and clean it up a bit, and also it is not a good look for younger players as well. Look, my personal opinion on the biff in rugby league is, look, players don't go out looking for fights and punching other players. It happens in the heat of battle. It happens when there's massive frustrations. Look, I don't think it happens because of, players going out there just wanting to do it. I think it's the fact that it is a sign of frustration, and look, it would very rarely happen anyway. Obviously, we saw it in State of Origin back in the early days before it got banned, and I think it was guaranteed that there'd be some sort of biff happening in State of Origin, that's for sure. But in club games, I don't think there was that many. Obviously, in the 80s, it was a very tough game, and there was fights that happened left, right, and centre in games. I know Canterbury and South, and there was one famous brawl, I guess you could say, between Parramatta and South, where I think Sterlo got sin bin at Parramatta Stadium back in the 80s. But yeah, I think it would get rid of the cat antics of players like Reid Marnie. He certainly has been in the news of late, especially this weekend, actually, with him and TPJ, Tavita Pangai Jr. I think Tavita just practically ragdolled him. I don't know what Reid said to him, but I think Tavita ragdolled him. And look, if that was able to have, if punching was in the game these days, I dare say, look, I'm no expert there, but I dare say that Tavita might have put one on Reid. And I also think that you probably wouldn't see players like Reid try and upset the big blokes, that's for sure. Look, I know it's a tactic of players, of certain players, to upset certain players, to potentially get them into the sin bin and then get an advantage for their team. But I dare say that if it was not an automatic sin bin for punches thrown, then I think these sort of antics wouldn't happen. So thank you very much, Para Eels _foreign correspondent, for sending that one through. The next one comes from Weza438. Thank you very much for commenting on that post. He mention, he says here, I want to see the old school scrums come back. Being able to push the opposite team or some other way of contesting for the ball would be great to see. Look, totally agree with you. I think scrums these days are, a little bit of a joke. I think these days sometimes you see wingers and fullbacks in a scrum, sometimes in a second row position. Very rarely do you see that though, but it has happened before. The lock forward can be a winger or a 5'8" or a halfback even sometimes. Sometimes they put the hooker back at lock to pick the ball up from the scrum, as the hooker would have the best passing game. Well, you would think that in a team, as he passes the ball more often than anyone else in the team in a game. So, and also to the fact that the way that they pack the scrums as well is some of these players, especially in the lock position and sometimes to an extent in the second row position, don't necessarily have their heads in properly and do not bind properly, but old school scrums where the hooker in the middle of the scrum, in the middle of the front row there, used to have to contest for the ball back in the 80s, 90s, before, they would have also tried to do second row feeds in the 80s and 90s as well. And I think I also remember Sterlo being penalised in a State of Origin game for trying to do a second row feed in a State of Origin game, New South Wales and Queensland. So I think back in the old days, hookers used to have to contest for the ball. So the ball would go in the middle and hookers would have to rake the ball back for their team. And sometimes not necessarily whose team had the feed would win the ball in the scrum. It would sometimes be the opposition player as well who would get that ball for their team. So it all depends on the other teams, or your team and the other teams, the way that they pushed in the scrum as well. If they can get that ball back. I think I can remember the most recent one I can think of, and it was probably a little bit embarrassing for me as a Parramatta fan, and I think it happened in a pretty a game that is pretty memorable for me, because I had my last name on the back of Willie Tonga's jersey in this game, and that was over in New Zealand, Parramatta and the Warriors, and the Warriors absolutely drove Parramatta backwards in the scrum, and absolutely it must have been about 10 metres, 15 metres, and obviously they won the ball in that scrum. So just having contests for the ball would be great to see again. So thank you, Wezza438, for sending that one through on Instagram. Now I'll just flick over to the Facebook page, the Para Cave Podcast Facebook page, and this post also went up on that page as well. So I'll just have a look at that one. And we have a few comments there, so thank you very much for those people that came through with these questions or suggestions. And just quickly, David Streher, I hope I pronounced that correctly, proper feed into the centre of the scrum, which I was just talking about, where the hooker has to do his job and win the ball, not just play dummy half. Also, those in the idiot box upstairs not to interfere with play unless asked by the referee on ground. So I assume he is talking about the bunker upstairs. And speaking of the bunker, Corkidis has sent through, tries being scored from forward passes can't be ruled by the bunker. They should eliminate the flat pass to fix this. Robert Sloan has said pack a scrum like they did in the 70s and 80s. So a lot of scrum points being made here. Travis Court, voluntary tackle. Sick of seeing blokes dive to the ground to avoid a tackle. Now, this one is a really interesting one. We do see it more often than not these days when a play breaks down and a player runs behind another player, and instead of being penalised for a shepherd, they basically sort of go to the ground and they make the defenders put a hand on them to say that's a tackle in the set of 6. So, yeah, you're right. I am sick of seeing that as well. I personally would like to see players... Look, mistakes are going to happen in games where you get your timing wrong and other players get their timing wrong, and you are going to run behind players. It's just going to happen with everything happening so fast. So that's what's going to happen these days. And look, in my opinion, if that does happen, instead of doing the voluntary tackle, and I know why they do it, it's so they can keep possession of the ball basically and don't give away a penalty and field position to the opposition. But they just need to be penalised. I think that's the best way to do it, rather than seeing these voluntary tackles as well. So that's probably the best example I can give of where we see that voluntary tackle as well. There's also other instances as well, more than likely off a kick from the opposition and the fullback taking the ball. And sometimes that happens there where he just goes to ground. Players don't touch him, but then they do end up touching him. I wouldn't touch him. I'd just leave him and see if the referee would blow a penalty for a voluntary tackle. Thank you very much, Travis, for sending that one through. And Nick Racanelli, he sent through the play the ball, so much like we talked about at the top of the show. He loved it when the tackle player could play the ball forward and also the marker could kick it or rake it back. That'll soon teach him to play it properly. So yeah, we touched on that one, Nick, at the top of the podcast, but thank you very much for sending that one through. Look, I totally agree about that one. I think, they would definitely play the ball properly indeed. Vicky Newson, scrums, put the ball in the middle, please, not behind the legs of the second row. Totally agree there, Vicky. Ronald Adam, playing the ball properly, they just throw it between their legs, the refs just let it go. Yes, we talked about that one before as well. Totally agree with that one. Sean Clark, wingers don't run in as if they know they will be owned. Yeah, totally. Dave Johnston, good old Dave, how you going, mate? Shout out to him. He says the biff, and as I said before, I don't think players would definitely go out looking for punching on with somebody. I think it just happens in the spare of the moment, in the frustration. And Anton Narkic, former guest on the podcast as well, competitive scrum. So a lot of talk and comments about scrums and rulings on scrums in terms of being competitive, playing the ball in the middle. So the hookers actually have a crack at trying to get that ball. So thank you very much to those for sending that one through. I really appreciate it. Now, on the Q&A post that I put up on Instagram, just a couple of ones coming through there, and they all came through from YTG with Nick. So if you haven't seen YTG with Nick, young Nicola, she is a young rugby league fan, a passionate women's rugby league fan. She plays rugby league herself, a Parramatta fan as well. You will see her mostly at all the NRLW games, definitely the Parramatta games, but she also goes to the other games as well, not only just here in Sydney, but also interstate as well. A fantastic supporter of women's rugby league, and she has sent through 3 little comments here, so I'll just read those ones out. The first home game for the girls next weekend, for the Eels girls that is at Eric Tweedale Stadium. Would love to see some of our Blue and Gold Army turn out and support the girls. They are playing with a lot of heart and passion this season and deserve the support. So, yes, definitely, that game is on Saturday this weekend at 11 a.m. Unfortunately, the timings of these NRLW games aren't the best for everybody, but hopefully there could be a big crowd there of the Blue and Gold Army supporting the Parramatta Eels women's team. They are doing pretty well at the moment. 3 wins for the season. They sit in 3rd spot on the ladder. They come up against Newcastle Knights, defending back-to-back premiers, at Eric Tweedale Stadium this weekend. Now, they actually have 3 home games in a row, starting with that one on Saturday. The next one is at CommBank Stadium, and that one I think is against the Dragons at CommBank Stadium before the men take on the Dragons as well at CommBank Stadium. And then the week after that, they have a game at Eric Tweedale Stadium versus the Titans, I think it is. So, very crucial period for the women's team in the NRLW, as 3 home games in a row. They sit in 3rd spot on the ladder. There's only, I think, 9 games in the season, being a 10-team competition, and when this is round number 5. So, an important period to try and get 3 wins out of 3. So the girls need all your support. If you can turn up, that would be great. The next one is a question for Kiana Takarangi, who I asked her in the podcast, the NRLW Weekly Wrap podcast for round number 4. I did ask that one in there, but I'll just quickly go through that one again. And she asked if she wanted to ask Kiana, which she did answer. What do you think of the NRL last weekend? So round number 4, the Knights have lost 2 in a row. The Broncos seem to have regained some form. The Sharks are looking strong, and Para hold out the Tigers to stay in the top 4. So completely right there. Look, my thoughts on that one, just quickly, is the Knights have lost 2 in a row. Very unlike the Newcastle Knights to lose 2 in a row. Unfortunately, they have lost Jessie Southwell for this weekend's game. She failed her HIA during the weekend. And the Broncos, yes, they have regained some form, back-to-back wins. They see themselves, I think it's 4th position on the ladder. So they have definitely regained some form, that is for sure. The Sharks are running hot at the moment, 4 from 4, and on top of the ladder. And yes, Para got the win, 12 points to 10 over the Tigers. And her last comment there was, how good was it to see Kennedy Cherrington cross the line for the girls in her 25th NRLW game? It was sensational to see Kennedy cross the line in a milestone game for her in the NRL. And congratulations for reaching that milestone of 25 games in the NRLW with the one club, the Parramatta Eels. A massive effort, and she did score a try, and it ended up being the game-winning try as Rachel Pearson converted the goal. And the Tigers did score a late try, but the Eels were able to hang on 12 points to 10. So it was a good row-busting run that got Kennedy to the line, and geez, didn't she celebrate after scoring that one, pointing to her wristbands, which I think had her sister's name on it. I'm not too sure what the other one had, but her sister Ruben would have been in the crowd for sure. Unfortunately, she is out for the season, which is a big blow for Parramatta, but she is a massive supporter of her sister Kennedy, and no doubt that's who she was pointing to on her wristband. So she was excited about scoring a try in that milestone game. I think her second try of the season. I think she scored one in round number 1 as well. So 2 out of 4 games, a pretty good record in scoring tries in the NRLW. So look, thank you very much for everybody for sending those questions and thoughts about rule changes and also the Q&As as well. I really appreciate that. So stay tuned on the Instagram and the Facebook pages of the Para Cave podcast for those little posts up, and I'm happy to read those ones out and try and answer them as best I can, giving my thoughts and ideas and thoughts. And look, as I said before, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, look, everyone's got an opinion. I might not be an expert, I'm just a rugby league fan. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it, and look, it'd be something that I would like to do each and every week. So as I said before, stay tuned to the Instagram and the Facebook pages. Look out for the question of the day posts and the Q&A posts, and get commenting and asking your questions or your thoughts or your answers to those questions as well. I really appreciate it. If you've got any ideas for what questions you would like, the questions of the day you would like me to put up, let me know as well. Send me a DM, and who knows, your question might feature as the question of the day. Thank you very much for listening. Look, enjoy your week and your weekend of rugby league as well. Plenty more coming up on the Para Cave podcast throughout the week. Thank you, enjoy, and go Para!
Hello, Para Cave podcast listeners. My name is Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty and long-term sponsor of the Para Cave podcast. If you're looking to sell your property or buy, or just curious to know what your property is worth in today's market, give me a call today on 0421 588 445.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. See you next